Hi, and welcome to Conversations to Connect. I'm Fenella Hawksley, and this podcast is brought to you in collaboration with the Campaign to End Loneliness. Social isolation and loneliness are widespread and can have a huge impact on health, happiness, and overall well-being. All people of all ages need connections that matter, and on this podcast we will be hosting conversations to share insights, knowledge, and research to inspire change and to help people feel more connected. On today's episode, I'm joined by Marc Abraham, or Marc The Vet, as he is commonly referred to. Marc is an award-winning veterinary surgeon, broadcaster, author, and animal welfare campaigner. Marc was awarded an OBE for services to animal welfare in the 2021 Queen's Birthday Honours. As well as campaigning to improve animal welfare in the UK, Marc volunteers around the world and visits schools and teaches pupils about looking after animals and each other. Welcome, Marc. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for inviting me on, Fenella. We've got a lot to get through.
We do, because you're a very busy man.
I am. Although we have found a couple of hours just to hang out this afternoon, which is
That's true.
Which is rather pleasant, actually, and a nice break from campaigning.
To start, before we get into all of your experience with animals, what connects you with the topic of loneliness?
I think through various phases of my life, I've experienced loneliness, and that's I know we were talking about this earlier. What defines loneliness? Is it such a bad thing? But I think it's a feeling of discomfort from being on your own. I think would be a good definition of loneliness, because a lot of people, as we said, are quite happy just being on their own. And are they lonely then? But I think it's almost like it's a negative connotation, isn't it? Loneliness. So I think growing up, definitely lonely, all through like early years, all through teens. Because I was a nerd, I was a real geek. I think in those days we used to call those sort of people squares. Because I was obsessed with nature and wildlife, and I questioned everything. And I never really kind of conformed to being a social kid, social teenager. So I did prefer the company of tadpoles, caterpillars, butterflies, birds, broken eggshells, to what everyone else seemed to be doing, which was the norm. Probably because I just maybe didn't have the confidence to fit in, or felt different enough to not engage. So yeah, I definitely felt loneliness there. I think through, as I say, teenage years, studying so hard because I had to be a vet. It wasn't that I wanted to be one. We were way past that.
When did you know you had to be a vet?
Apparently when I was 3.
Oh, wow.
And that's a story that my mum is more than happy to tell every single person that she meets. I had a pet tortoise, and the tortoise had a wound in its leg, a gash in its leg, and the gash had a maggot in it. And I managed to scoop out the maggot with a twig in the back garden and clean the wound, and the wound got better, the leg got better, the tortoise got better. So I had that sort of first experience of making an animal better, which was the beginning of a long journey that still exists today. So it was one of the first things I kind of knew about that existed. My uncle was a vet, 2 sides of the family never spoke, but I was aware of the profession, I was aware of how great that made me feel to make an animal better. And I think that combination at that age was like, right, I have to help animals. And I guess the older I got, the more I realised that a vet is the ultimate, if you like, for what I wanted to do personally and achieve. And it was all about having to be a vet rather than just wanting to be one.
So did you always feel a connection with animals?
Always, more than humans. Still do, to some extent. I always felt an empathy and a compassion for the underdog. And the obvious underdog is animals. And I think in those days it was nature. So, commonly I'd go around to my parents' friend's house, we'd go there, and as soon as I arrived, they'd just give me a jam jar, and I'd just disappear. And I'd come back at the end of 3-4 hours with pond water, or, as I say, frog spawn, or moths, or feathers that I'd found.
So you said that it was quite a lonely time growing up, and in your own words, being nerdy and knowing that you wanted to be a vet. But what was it that made you feel connected to animals?
I think the vulnerability, really. I think I shared a feeling of vulnerability, and my history as I'm a third generation refugee. My grandma escaped the Holocaust. Her parents were murdered in Auschwitz. So I've always had a sense of feeling of how underdogs are treated and how the most vulnerable are kind of treated throughout history, running through my veins and taught to me as a child from my family. So I guess I've always been aware of if there's an opportunity to help or connect with the most vulnerable, then kind of why wouldn't you? And I think if you're feeling vulnerable yourself, you immediately have common ground. So that helps any connection, doesn't it, if you have common ground? So that was my common ground, I think, feeling as vulnerable as a tadpole, which sounds mental, but it kind of, that's it in a nutshell.
And then empathising with them and wanting to help.
Empathising, compassion, kindness follows that, and just a kind of a caring outlook on things, and just being aware and being, I think just being aware of people or things or animals that just don't have the same sort of privilege or strengths, I guess, as you have, and then trying to make it better for them and that community, whether it's animal or human.
So let's speak a bit about your journey to becoming a vet, campaigner, broadcaster, author. So you studied to be a vet at university at Edinburgh. What led you towards campaigning?
Again, I think coming from a familial background of injustice, so Holocaust, persecution, racism, whatever you want to call it, I think you're finely tuned to be aware of other injustices and to act if you can. And I think I was never really a campaigner until I saw something that I just couldn't settle, because I thought I've got to do something about this, and I think I've got the resources to maybe just have a crack at it. And that was 2009 when I was working as an emergency and trauma surgeon there, and I saw in my practice 8 puppies coming in dying of a horrific disease called parvovirus, which is commonly picked up in conditions of poor husbandry. For example, puppy farms. And puppy farms are sort of large agricultural units in the middle of nowhere that have maybe 200 breeding bitches that just constantly pump out puppies on every heat.
Wow. Profit
is put always above welfare. They're usually sold by a third-party network, either to pet shops or to dealers that sell to other dealers and to pet shops, or pet shop license holders, so riding stables, for example, and can sell these puppies legally without their mum, way away from where they were born. Okay, so that's causes all sorts of problems because the puppies are removed without being adequately socialised. The mums obviously are traumatised by their pups being removed. Conditions are horrible, straw, so lots of disease, lots of untreated issues, behavioural issues, medical issues, surgical issues. And of course, traditionally, the member of the public would go to a third-party seller, like a pet shop, buy a puppy, a little fluffy puppy. Oh, it's a bit quiet. Oh yeah, it's a bit stressed in here. We'll take it home, it'll be fine. Take it home, huge stress levels of changing environment. And then the viral load would explode, parvovirus or pneumonia or colitis or all these problems. And they were the medical problems. And the surgical problems like joint problems, eye problems, heart problems, behavioural problems because they've been separated too early from their mum, so nervous aggression, potentially separation anxiety. All of a sudden you've got all these problems that are costing money. This is meant to be a fun little pet for the family, and now it's costing thousands of pounds to correct. Even if it can't get better, it's kept with problems or it has to be put to sleep. So I just, one night in 2009, 8 puppies came in with this particular disease. They all came in with owners who were clients of subscribing practices to our emergency clinic, and they were all the same sort of age and breed. They were all like Jack Russell-y type of dogs. And I just kind of thought, all these families were so excited about buying these puppies. They've now got them home. There's diarrhea, there's vomiting, there's blood, there's puppies in clear pain, agony. They've obviously bought bowls and leads and food and all the fun stuff, and now they're in a veterinary hospital. We're treating them with sort of isolation outfits on because it's so contagious. 2 of them died. The rest are on drips and painkillers and antiemetics to stop them being sick. It's like, this is the roughest start. These puppies are like 7-8 weeks old. I just thought, how wrong is this? And then I started researching, and I went to the place just outside Brighton where they were born. It was a stable block, but they were a legal, licensed third-party puppy seller, like a pet shop. I got the owners to bring in all the paperwork, and I unpeeled stickers and found out that the dogs are actually being bred in Wales in puppy farms.
Mm-hmm.
Legal, licensed puppy farms. Again, the whole thing was legal, but immoral. And realised that this is wrong to sell puppies without the mum present, so you don't see the pup interacting with his or her mother. And that was it. That was the sense of injustice that I thought I could do something about. And the reason I thought I could do something about it, because at the time I was the vet on the Paul O'Grady show, and it was on Channel 4, R.I.P., most amazing guy, and gave him my big break, and kind of is responsible for saving so many lives, animals and humans. And I was able to use that media platform to engage with other people, and that started me on the journey. So my early days of campaigning was really to raise awareness, to change public behaviour, and to tell people that there's only two options to choose from when you're getting a dog or cat. Either go to a rescue shelter or straight to the breeder. Do not go to a pet shop or any other third-party dealer. And I started doing a dog show, and I involved celebrities. That started in Brighton and ended up in Primrose Hill. And the more celebrities that came on board and influencers, the more people were aware of these options of how to get a dog responsibly. And we'd have these dog shows where every class was tweaked to the celebrity. So I remember Patsy Palmer, who obviously played Bianca in EastEnders. She was Ginger. She judged Best Red Setter. There was a chocolate shop in Brighton called Chocky Wocky Doodah, famously, and they had a TV programme at the time, and they judged Best Chocolate Labrador.
Wow.
And then Michael Watson, who was quite a famous boxer, he judged Best Boxer. So we tweaked everything and made it a bit more personal to the celebrity. And then in the middle of the dog show, we'd have a parade of dogs that had been rescued from puppy farm breeding facilities. And you'd have French bulldogs and chihuahuas wearing lovely collars and maybe little dresses and little tiaras. And in the middle, you'd have these really sad, pathetic, in the true sense of the word, ex-breeding dogs with their teats dragging on the ground, cesarean scars, broken teeth, rope burns. And it was like, this is the evidence. And weirdly, because I hadn't gone into political campaigning, to have evidence is the most crucial thing to form a campaign round. So we had all the elements, really. We had the public engagement, we had celebrities, we had the evidence, and we had a kind of a backstory, and we kind of had a solution, which was to only go to a rescue shelter or to a breeder. So that was the kind of core. We called it Pup Aid after Live Aid. And with Live Aid, which was musical based, we always had music at the dog shows, and we always had food, and we had stalls.
So I remember you saying that campaigning is quite a lonely journey, but also it sounds like you were really building community around the campaigning.
Yeah.
So is it kind of a contrast of fighting for something you need to do a lot on your own, and that can be quite lonely and difficult, but you really have to have this sense of community around you to make it easier to continue?
You're providing a platform for that community to form.
Okay.
And that's the stuff that takes the time and the donkey work behind the scenes. And you don't burden or even tell anyone about it, because you just get on with it. You know, it's boring to tell someone you've just spent the last 6 hours sending 250 emails to MPs. However, it's the stuff that needs to be done. And I think a lot of campaigning is seen to be quite glamorous, because you're seen with a celebrity or you're seen doing something cool. 98% of campaigning is really tough, and it's depressing and it's lonely, and it isn't sexy or cool or anything to brag about. But yeah, we only sometimes just see I call them the scraps from the table. But you do provide these platforms for communities to form. The simpler your campaigning message, the better. One-liners, obviously, even better. And you make it as inclusive as possible. And the secret to effective campaigning is to, especially when in political campaigning, is to almost form an ambush. So you surround the chief decision maker with all the people that can influence him saying, yes, we need this to happen. Celebrities, cross-party MPs, major stakeholders, so for example, big charities that are relevant, public. So all around is everyone going, you need to do this, and then they go, we just got to do this, I suppose. Setting up all those communities to set up the ambush is what takes the time. And the tone and the language and every single word you use is different for everyone you're connecting with. So the public have their own conversation, weirdly. The celebrities you deal with slightly differently. The politicians you deal with. And so I guess you're a community manager, weirdly, which I've never really said out loud, but that's what you do. You're kind of directing the traffic of various communities, and you're making sure the messaging is the same across each one, but written slightly differently to, I guess, provide the ultimate engagement possible. And I wasn't on my own. I was part of a coalition of like-minded campaigners who wanted the same thing. We all brought different things to the table. We were all geographically separate, so Wales and Folkestone, Sheffield, Redditch. But we were all on email at that time. We didn't really have much social media back in the day, because we're talking sort of 2009, 10, 11. So Twitter hadn't really, exploded. There was no Instagram. Facebook, I guess, was the main social media platform. But in terms of resources, that's all you have. The resources you have as a grassroots campaigner. You're not part of a big organisation that has a PR team, a public affairs team, a budget, campaign. You don't have all that. You're just working full time as your job and doing everything in your spare time. So I've always said that the resources you have are social media and creativity. And sometimes creativity and imagination can be responsible for such change and impact. Because grassroots campaigning is all about getting noticed. And obviously if you have great campaigns and they're creative, you'll get noticed quicker and by the relevant media, let's say, and change can happen like that. And I think I owe a hell of a lot of that to my dad, who was in advertising and constantly was coming up with campaigns from the creative side. And it just shows that we were 5 or 6 people working in our spare time as grassroots campaigners who very rarely saw each other, just on email. We knew what we wanted and we never crossed over our skill sets. The impact that can make when you're fighting against governments and industries and sometimes some of the biggest animal welfare organisations in the country. So yeah, resources is crucial, and that's one of the reasons I wrote my last book, which is about this. Basically, every chapter is a tool that's out there that's accessible and free, so everyone can do it. And I wrote it because I didn't want anyone wasting their time or resources, because we don't have much of them. And if someone can pick up a book and go, right, I can do that, and that will make that difference, and it's fairly easy and it's free, and this is how to do it, and these are case studies, then I'll do it. I was always conscious during the journey of no one else spending as more time than they had to on the various steps it takes to make progress and change happen.
So how long did it take from seeing the 8 puppies to Lucy's Law?
So Lucy's Law, it's important to point out, is the banning of third-party sellers. Yeah. So that was always what we were trying to aim for. It was called the Campaign to Ban Commercial Third-Party Puppy and Kitten Sellers and Dealers, which is a huge mouthful. When you're explaining it to someone, they've probably fallen asleep or become distracted by the time you got to the end of the sentence. Which again was a huge lesson because it wasn't succinct enough. The reason we called it Lucy's Law eventually is because we'd hit every brick wall. We'd been told it was never going to happen, at least for another 5 years, even to be considered. And we were fighting against these organisations and government and industry. And we were at our lowest ebb. And Lucy, who was a most incredible Cavalier King Charles Spaniel, rescued from a legal licensed puppy farm, who was a personality in herself. She had a social media page, Facebook, 70,000 followers. Her own Elisa, who lived in Birmingham. But she was basically raising awareness of rescue dogs and puppy farming with the resources she had, an iPhone and Facebook. And incredible what she did. And again, imagination, creativity. Lucy the Rescue Cavalier was the page. It still exists. I encourage everyone to look it up on Facebook. And she sadly passed away in 2016 on December the 8th. In 2017, we hit our lowest ebb. And I was operating on a dog just down the coast from where we are in Brighton in a place called Peacehaven. And it just came to me that if we renamed and rebranded the campaign to ban commercial puppy and kitten sellers and dealers and call it Lucy's Law, A, we have a phenomenal alliteration. B, the hashtag is just a gift. We have the backstory and it's personal, and I designed...
You've got a face of a campaign.
Face of a campaign, and I designed the brand on the back of an envelope. It got turned into an actual brand, literally within a few hours by the Mirror, who became our media partner. And then we launched Lucy's Law, and we were successful with it, but it took 10 years from beginning the campaign, seeing those puppies, to actually the first Lucy's Law passing, because then we passed it in... Animal welfare law is devolved in the British Isles, so there's different laws in Wales, different laws in Northern Ireland, Scotland. So we had to then do campaigns in each of those countries as well. But it's a lot easier when you've got one. And it's a lesson for anyone campaigning for a law that is devolved, which means it's its own legislation in other countries. Always just get one, and then you can go, well, they've done it, why can't you do it? It's a bit of a fear of missing out driver. So Lucy's Law provided a legal framework where investigations and prosecutions could happen if the public or anyone else suspected that either wasn't the mum or the mum wasn't there or there was something dodgy going on. Before, there was no accountability. Before, someone would go to a pet shop, they'd buy a pup, a bit like the ones that we treated in 2009, and go back to the pet shop or the riding stables and say, my puppy died, or my puppy's really ill, I've got a bill of £3,000. And they go, so what? And they go, well, where was it bred? I'm not telling you. So what Lucy's Law did was, and it's no way a silver bullet to end puppy farming, but it made every dog and cat breeder in the UK accountable, which is the first step in ending irresponsible and unscrupulous breeding and selling. And there's a lot of work that still needs to be done. But it's all about accountability, and as well as education, and a good campaign will educate at the same time. So the three goals really for campaigning, I always think, is raising awareness, changing public behaviour, and potentially influencing legislation, or all three.
And what do you think the benefits are of getting a puppy for a family?
Oh my God.
For a person?
Or any animal.
Any animal.
Companionship. Unconditional love is the phrase that's often bandied around. But it's a family friend, it's someone that you can trust, it's someone that you can tell secrets to, or your kids can. And also, if you want to rescue an animal, which I would always promote over anything, you're helping that animal have a new life. You're providing a space for another animal that needs to be in a shelter, and and I always think this bond is stronger, and I've seen this from experience. The bond is stronger when people adopt an animal from a shelter, animal with a problem from a shelter, an animal with a behavioural problem from a shelter, because they have to, if they're committed enough, which you'd want them to be, obviously,
work on that relationship.
To work on that relationship. And I've seen the best relationships happen when people have adopted a dog that's broken. And Lucy is a really good example of that. Before Lisa got Lucy, she only bought puppies, or the family. She didn't know about rescue, she didn't know about puppy farming. Lucy had epilepsy, arthritis, dry eye, separation anxiety. She had all these problems. And working with a broken, shut down dog, as they're often known, from a puppy farm, is often a way of not speeding up bonding, but really increasing the strength of that bond, because you're working to get them better. And ex-puppy farm dogs classically don't know how to be dogs, because they've never been on grass, they've never eaten out of a bowl before, they've never been stroked. So they have to be rehomed with a dog that's already a dog, just to learn how to be a dog, which is horrific. So I would always say to people, for an even stronger pet-human bond, then always go rescue, and always try and rescue an animal that maybe needs even more help. Work with a behaviourist, do it appropriately and properly, because you may actually have a much better relationship out the back of it.
So Robin Hewings, who's the campaign director of Campaign to End Loneliness, he wrote an article for the RSPCA, and in it speaks about the benefits of having a pet for loneliness and companionship. And actually people who lived on their own but had a pet during lockdown suffered less in terms of being isolated and alone. And like you said, building empathy, building a relationship. I think that bond that you have with an animal is so strong. Even I was reading examples of having a cat in a care home helps people in the care home feel connected, build relationships, feel like they're looking after something, which also can give you a sense of purpose.
A sense of purpose is really important, and also to look forward to something. So if you know the cat's coming in every Tuesday, oh my God, can't wait for Tuesday to come round. The other thing that dogs offer over cats with regard to loneliness is, of course, you have to walk them. And when you're walking a dog, you're more likely to encounter someone positively, hopefully, that wants to, stroke the dog or start a conversation about the dog. I don't know, it offers up so many more opportunities to interact, I think. Maybe not so much with cats, obviously, because they live at home and they do their own thing. But dogs
very
especially...
independent.
Very independent. But they, I doubt cats ever get lonely. So they thrive on
they do. They thrive on solitude.
Yeah, and dogs, on the other hand, are obviously pack animals, so they thrive on interactions with other dogs and humans. So that's quite an interesting, lonely comparison, I think. Cats are so independent, and they, even multi-cat households can struggle.
Don't enjoy
other cats' company. You know, you have to really work hard to have a harmonious family of cats in one house. cat flaps and cat trees and boxes and rooms for them to chill out in, cat diffusers in the walls, etc. So yeah, that's quite a nice differentiation. But yeah, dogs I think get people out and about.
And part of a dog owning community as well.
Yes, and you see that a lot on social media, but also down the beach here, you'll have groups of people in the morning walking their dogs, hanging out, having coffees together, and it does provide again a platform for common ground for people to come together and to feel included in a community.
I also think sometimes people are scared to talk to other people, but when there's a dog or a baby,
yeah, it's an icebreaker. It's an absolute icebreaker.
Feels easier.
And talking about babies, it's worth saying that a lot of dogs, especially over lockdown, but a lot of dogs, which we call brachycephalic, are flat-faced dogs, so French bulldogs, pugs, Boston terriers, are often purchased or rescued because they have baby faces. They're round faces with big wide eyes, and there's been a lot of studies done that people want to nurture, and it releases oxytocin when they look at these dogs' faces because it's like looking at a baby's face. So they're more likely to want, that's why they're so popular, they're more likely to want a French bulldog or a pug. There's also another community of people that not just want a pug or a French bulldog or a flat-faced dog, they want one that's got clear breathing problems or trouble walking because they want to nurture something that needs their help.
Oh my gosh.
Sense of purpose, etc. So there's a lot of factors in terms of choosing a pet to be aware of. But I mean, at the end of the day, I think as long as you go to rescue, where there are also puppies, it's dogs that their owners have died or dogs that have gone into rescue because their owners couldn't go into temporary accommodation, dogs owners that have run out of money, especially at the moment, cost of living. There's so many reasons why these second-hand pets are available. They've been neutered, they've been vaccinated, they've been defeed, wormed, toilet trained. There's an expression I heard once called plug-in pets, just plug in and go, and they are. So please, anyone listening, watching, please consider rescue first. There's so many rescue shelters around, and if you are of a lonely disposition, what a way to cure loneliness with pet companionship.
And I know you said that you can foster a pet.
There we go.
So you can try out what it's like. I'd never heard of this, fostering a pet. Could you explain a bit about that?
Yeah, so fostering is definitely an unknown quantity, and it's one of the most fascinating things that people just don't know about. And it's basically temporary adoption. So if you go to a rescue shelter and there's maybe a dog recovering for an operation and it needs cage rest, say for example, for 6 weeks, then it's better to cage rest at home than in a shelter, in a familiar circumstance. Sometimes it could be 2 years. Maybe the owner's gone abroad for 2 years or just emigrated and left the dog. So it's a temporary adoption. A lot of rescue dogs are fostered from puppy farms to get them used to a home environment, and then they go elsewhere. So there's lots of different reasons why dogs would be up for foster. But again, it gives that dog a home environment rather than a shelter or cat.
Can you foster cats?
Yeah, you can foster cats.
Okay.
And it also provides an extra space in the kennels for another animal that needs it. So fostering, and there's a lovely expression called failed fosterer.
Yes, I wanted to ask you about this.
It sounds really negative, but it's actually probably the most positive expression out there. That's when you've fostered an animal and you've decided that actually you'd like to keep it. And it's okay to keep it because the circumstances allow it, and you end up adopting it for good. And that's called a failed fosterer, which I love. And there's many failed fosterers out there. And it just shows that, if you do strike a relationship with your pet and you become best friends, sometimes there is an opportunity to continue that relationship and look after the pet for life.
And I think also what you were saying about the benefits that pets can bring, it's also teaching compassion, looking after something about people struggling with diabetes or children with diabetes. Looking after a pet made them then more able to stick to a routine and look after themselves because it builds discipline, 100%. Routine, looking after something else and looking after yourself. So I know that you teach, you go into schools and you talk to pupils about looking after animals and looking after each other. So how do you think, that building relationships with animals can build empathy, and why do you think that's important for children?
Because we live in a mean world, kind of brutal world, and there's so many factors you know, to grow up in a social media world is, I mean, it's full of possibilities. It's not all negative, but it's also full of, you know, social pressure to conform. For example, especially appearance-wise on, for example, Instagram, which we didn't have back in the day. And I think kids are now growing up, and they're overloaded, in my opinion, with information 24/7 from social media, from the traditional school and friends, but also, you know, when we were young, petrol stations weren't open on a Sunday. There was 3 or 4 channels. We had such restricted options of what we could engage with, let's say, as an information source or a form of entertainment. Now, you could literally watch TikTok until you died, and you'd still have content that you hadn't seen. And there's no real, I mean, I guess that's where responsible parenting comes in, but there's no boundaries kind of set by society. It's a free-for-all, and it's up to parents or guardians or maybe older brothers and sisters to say, look, so I think by explaining empathy, compassion, kindness to kids using kind of caring for animals and looking out for each other, it's a lot easier for them to get it rather than just telling them stuff. It's explaining the tools and letting them make their minds up themselves.
So how do you do that?
So I have a set lesson plan, and I do a local school visit probably every week in Brighton or around Brighton. So we start with a game, and the game is a load of laminated pictures of baby animals, and on the back is what they grow up to be. So there's easy ones like a fox cub, and they have to guess what the adult is. So we start with, you know, what are you going to be when you grow up? And the question I'm looking for is adult or grown up. But then you get doctor, vet, adult. Okay, so what are the grown ups of these baby animals? So we do fox cubs and kittens, and it goes a bit more difficult. Tadpole. Okay, if you're going to answer this one, you have to say the whole life cycle. Same with the caterpillar. And it goes on. This is a chance for me to just engage with them. It's always quick fire. There's no such thing as a wrong answer. It's always, oh, so close, or nearly, or have another go. It's never, no, that's wrong, because that tends to put people off asking. So it's a real culture of positivity and pupils going, oh, and you know the thing they do when they're going to burst. And then the last picture is a baby hedgehog, which does look odd. And then you flip that, and it's a hedgehog, adult hedgehog with a broken leg, with a bandage on its leg. So then we go, how do you know it's got a broken leg? What signs of illness? So we talk about signs of illness with pets, signs of illness with wildlife, signs of illness with humans. And you can just dip into each: humans, wildlife, pets, signs of illness, how to diagnose, how to treat. So we talk about that and make it quite a holistic approach. So basically, if a hedgehog can't eat, it dies. What happens to a human if it can't eat? Well, it dies. So it's making people realise that the same factors, risks and outcomes happen to pets, wildlife and humans. And when I say humans, I mean them, their friends, their teachers, their parents. And then we sort of back off a little bit and have a bit of another game, which is a bag of stuff from the surgery, which they have to guess what it is. And obviously some are more difficult than others, but we always work to an answer, and we always get there in the end. And you can sometimes tell whose parents are nurses or doctors or vets. One 4-year-old got endotracheal tube the other day.
Wow.
Didn't say it, but said that's the tube for oxygen, you know, when you're making an animal better. And I was like,
wow.
Who's told you this? Who sent you? But you're always surprised at some of the answers. I mean, they're amazing answers. But again, it's a culture of positivity and willing to shout out what they think. Is always hands up first, obviously, and then we just talk about themes. You know, any questions, and we sometimes talk about flat-faced dogs. So this is primary school, so anything from 2 till 9. Mm-hmm. Eating animals, euthanasia, sometimes the summer dangers with dogs, hot pavements, etc. So we tweak everything. It's about 45 minutes, and I usually do like 3 classes in the morning. So I'm usually at the school for sort of 9 till 12. And it's absolutely fascinating. And I just think if you give the kids the tools to work the answers out themselves, rather than a grown-up stranger who's wearing a blue
dictating
pyjama top effectively to them, scrub top in front of them, dictating and just talking, then they go, oh, that's why that happens. And you can see them working stuff out rather than telling them. And it's quick fire, bam, ask, question, bang. It's like there's no more than 2 sentences I say before asking them for an answer. So it's really interactive. Kids seem to like them, and I'll always do. I've done them for like 20 years. But then, funny enough, post lockdown, I've introduced the caring for one, looking out for one another one, because before that it was all about animals. Now,
how do you link that with animals
what
and each other?
What diseases can humans have that are invisible?
Oh,
That's usually the one, and they all hands up, even if they're 4 years old. Mental health, it's so well known now. And the other thing I do is one of the props from the bag is a dog muzzle, so usually they kind of know what it is. But then we talk about dog safety and how to approach dogs responsibly and not to run up to them and pull their tail. Ask the owner, let them sniff your hand. I mean, a lot of them know this already, which is fantastic. But that information can save their life, you know. So a lot of the stuff I do in Westminster, again, is about education, maybe getting that on the school curriculum one day, about just the school visit, teaching empathy, compassion, kindness, caring for each other, plus the dog safety element. So it's all intertwined, weirdly.
Is there an element about humans connecting with nature?
Yeah, always. Some of my cards, the pictures, there's a seagull chick, which obviously everyone down here should know what it is. There's also a starling, and I'm not sure if you're aware, but in winter we have the murmurations around the pier. So a lot of it is about, you know, who's seen a starling, who's seen a bat, who's seen a seagull, making them aware that these animals are in our... But I mean, a lot of them, especially in Brighton, a lot of kids do see the countryside and the seaside, and they know exactly what's going on. And they're already engaged. Kids love animals.
The second episode of the podcast was with a forest bathing guide,
Oh.
Tansy, and that we were discussing how feeling connected to nature as well helps you feel more connected to yourself and to others and less lonely. It can help reduce feelings of loneliness. So there's multiple ways in which teaching kids from a young age about being connected to animals and being connected to nature can make them feel maybe part of something greater than themselves.
I guess you're always providing opportunities for them to go, oh, I haven't thought of that. Maybe ask your parents or whoever looks after you to take you on a countryside walk, or just to walk along the beach and see stuff and find stuff. Oh yeah, and then obviously since I got awarded my OBE, I take that now to the lessons.
Oh, yeah.
And I've got the picture of the King, he was Prince Charles then, but the King giving it to me. And I say that, and then, oh, wow. Anyway, I say I got a medal from the King for being kind to animals and humans, well, mainly animals. But if you're kind to humans and animals, you can maybe... Everyone in this room has the opportunity to get a medal from the King. And then I go, who wants a medal from the King?
Everyone.
Everyone. And then they all come up and they can touch the medal. And I say, the King's touched this. So they touch it, which is massive. I can't even imagine how their minds... Some of them, well, the ones that care, minds are blown. I would have been at that age. Because, again, it's a connection, isn't it? And I hope that inspires kids to just be nice and empathetic and just care about animals and humans, preferably both. But just to think and just have the tools on board now to go, okay, I need to do something about that. I need to tell a grown-up or a teacher someone's ill, you know. And I just think there's so much cruelty and injustice in the world. If you start empowering kids at that age with the tools to work out what's right and wrong and when to seek help, it can only result in less injustice and cruelty and maybe even prejudice and bullying and stuff like that. So yeah, I try and do my bit. And I also think that I think everyone can do a school visit. You don't have to be like a vet. You can be obviously something medical, but you can also be any job. You could be a lawyer, you could be an accountant. I think kids really do listen to strangers coming in and talking about what they're passionate about. And I think the more people that did it, I think kids would get a much more well-rounded, broader view of jobs, different jobs, and just different opinions. But as long as it's all underpinned with compassion, I don't think you can go wrong with that.
So in many things that you do, or I guess all you do, you really build community around people who are passionate about improving welfare for animals and caring about nature and the environment around us. How did you start doing that? Was it through social media?
Funny thing is, you know, as a self-confessed nerd, I now seem to be in a position that I guess the word is facilitates. I can bring people together whether they like animals or nature, and I kind of know how to form a community. It's a difficult one because from a psychology point of view, I'm from a background that thrives on safety in numbers, I think, and I think it also thrives on being accepted and being included and being Jewish, although I'm not really a practicing Jew. I like the traditions, but that's about it. There is a sense of community there. Northwest London is where I'm from, although I live here. So I've experienced what it's like to be in a community and how important it feels to be included in the community. So I think I've got those tools from that. And then I guess if I see something that needs either raising awareness about or some sort of campaign in Westminster, I kind of know the tools of how to bring people together to make that happen. And I don't quite know why. I genuinely think anyone can do it. I guess the best example there's a few examples. There's one during the third lockdown. There's a group of us that used to go down the beach every sunset, and I say sunset in the loosest sense of the word. It was January and it was miserable and it was freezing and occasionally snowing and really windy. But we go down by the pier and just watch the murmuration of starlings. And I didn't know the others. There was about 6 of them. They were all photographers and people sort of in their 50s and 60s. And I was the weirdo who was on his own, in my big coat, just filming and putting on social media. And it was all about the starlings, and we eventually got chatting, and I was putting them stuff out on social media, and the peer saw it, and the peer started retweeting it, and the peer contacted me and said, do you want to come on the pier during the third lockdown when everything's closed and shoot murmurations, shoot with the camera obviously.
Yeah, thank God.
Yeah, right. From the pier. And obviously the pier was closed and there's no music and there's no people, so you could have this unbelievable experience where you could hear the wings of the starlings as they changed direction. But I went down to this group of people and I said, do you want to come on the pier? We've got permission. And, oh my God, amazing. So now we're a group of people on the pier when the pier's closed, filming the murmuration. I said, if we're doing this, there's a local TV channel called Latest. Can we make maybe a little documentary about it? They're like, yeah, why not? Well, if we're going to do that, why don't we bring an expert in? Yeah, right. So all of a sudden, I'm directing a documentary on the pier of these other 6 or 7 starling enthusiasts. And we did this documentary, and we got someone from the Sussex Ornithological Society to explain why they murmurate, blah, blah, blah. Documentary went out, it's still available on Latest TV. It's called Bird Dance in the Sky. So we had this documentary off the back of nothing.
Started from just a few individuals
from literally
watching,
just going down the beach, right?
Wow.
And then Anne, who runs the pier, who's an amazing friend of mine, she said, maybe, you know, when the starlings, they disappear in March, should we have something a bit more substantial when they come back in November? So we set up Starlings Roost, #Starlings Roost, which is a dedicated observation platform on the pier where people can buy starling photography. Their kids can do an origami starling. It was opened by Caroline Lucas. We had someone playing a guitar, doing a starling poem, loads of press, got on the news, and now it still exists as starlings. And there's a huge sort of wooden starling that people have their pictures taken next to. So that was a perfect case study of an idea that kind of the solution was to raise awareness about starlings. In the last starling season, every single sunset, there's a line of people along the western side of the pier waiting for them, not just turning up when they arrive, waiting 20-30 minutes for them beforehand, which is unheard of in this day and age because everything has to be instant. But it's almost stopped people in their tracks because they want to see the starlings, a bit of fear of missing out. So that worked wonders, and that was a classic example of sort of, there's a few of us did it, I can't take all the credit, but just driving something forward that has now resulted in something really beneficial for not just the people of Brighton and Hove and surrounding area, but the starlings themselves, because coupled with that campaign, if you like, was reducing insecticides, maybe providing more nest boxes, maybe putting more food out in the winter for the starlings. So there's always a campaigning animal welfare element to everything I do. It's just, you just never know where it's going to come from next.
I love that. And I also love how it starts as individuals.
Yeah. Common ground.
Separate activity, common ground.
Mission.
Builds a community, get other people involved, it becomes a movement.
A movement. A movement's a really good word, and it's exactly what happens. And you can perform movements about anything, really, and I have done.
Have you seen the video, How to Start a Movement?
No.
It's really funny. It's like
Oh,
at
maybe
a
I
music
have.
festival.
Yes,
and
I have.
everyone's sitting on the grass.
That's right.
One random person starts dancing. It's like, who's that weirdo? One other person joins, and then
at the
slowly,
end,
it's
the
weirder
weirdos
to
are
be
the
sitting
ones-
down
yeah.
than to be
And that's a really good analogy of campaigning, really. It just takes one person to do something, and then everyone kind of piles in and hopefully offers their various skill sets to accelerate that solution happening.
And it's also about raising awareness and shifting public perception, isn't it? And for it to become more normal.
You're normalising
Yeah.
things that maybe people haven't considered.
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, the loneliness charity in Brighton, who I'm now a very proud ambassador of, TogetherCo, togetherco.org.uk. I was aware of them from social media, had a little look, didn't take long to realise, wow, what a charity. All animal lovers. April, the CEO, is just wonderful, big fan of rescue pets. And then I thought, the whole curing loneliness with companionship from pets. So we linked up with the RSPCA Brighton, we had a few meetings, and it was like, why hasn't this been done before? So again, we set up a campaign called Pause to Connect, which we launched on the pier.
Yes, I wanted to ask you about Pause to Connect.
And it's so simple. It's not even really a campaign. It's like an awareness. It's almost like a suggestion rather than a campaign. It's like, have you considered? And
have you considered owning a pet to
or
help
just
with adopting?
Well, owning and then go to the shelter and foster or adopt. So again, it's facilitating. I find myself a facilitator now, and I love that. So I've done a documentary, which is about campaigning and dog welfare as well. But I'm kind of leading the documentary, but it's involving all the people I've met along the way that have really helped me and supported what I'm trying to achieve for animals. And I think a lot of campaigning and forming movements has to involve a hell of a lot of thanking and nods and giving back to the people that actually helped you develop. That's in life in general, but I think even more so with grassroots campaigning, because you don't have the resources, you don't have the budget, you don't have the ear of government. You're just someone with an idea that wants to get it over the line. So I've always made a point of thanking people along the way.
And maintaining those links with that
relationship
community, I guess,
building.
yeah.
But again, as well as the RSPCA Brighton, the peer are working quite closely with the loneliness charity TogetherCo. They've made them Charity of the Year. And peers, weirdly, the Peer Society are backing this as well. Peers are, again, kind of metaphors for loneliness, because they're structures that aren't on land, and they're kind of on their own. And people will go there and have their social time and rides maybe, and sit on a deck chair, and then they'll leave them, and the peer is always there. And there's a really interesting, we didn't really realise this until we started to have these conversations, that the peer is kind of a metaphor for a lonely individual. So the Peer Society is now backing what we're doing, and I think there's a few other events planned in National Loneliness Awareness Week on various peers around the country. So we're sort of ticking a few sort of weird boxes when it comes to that buzz phrase of social prescribing.
So I was reading an article from All-Party Parliamentary Group for Cats. I was reading a report that they'd written, and they were talking about social prescribing pets as part of a holistic solution for loneliness.
100%.
And this works if people want. So you can't just tell someone to get a pet if they don't want a pet. Yeah. But I think they were saying that if you did think that a pet could help with your loneliness, then it most likely will. And especially people that live on their own.
Well, this is where fostering comes in.
Yeah.
Because then you can just try. I mean, it sounds horrible, try before you buy. It's not meant like that. But it's almost like a temporary arrangement. And if it doesn't work out, it's absolutely fine. And there's no stigma or shame attached with that. But the option is there. And I think that option needs to be publicised, which is, again, what Go Cats were doing, and certainly what we're doing with Pause to Connect and TogetherCo and RSPCA Brighton. And by all means, I really want to roll this out across the country, because there's so many loneliness charities and campaigns, obviously so many rescue shelters, and they're full to the brim because all the lockdown pets are now being returned because people have gone back to work, and of course cost of living crisis. There's lots of plug-in pets out there to foster or adopt. And
you're tempting me to get a dog.
And there's lots of lonely databases, let's say.
Yeah.
So let's hope this is a cure for shelters being, full, a cure for people not to have to buy a pet, which are expensive, obviously. And if you can get a plug-in pet that's already house-trained and neutered and vaccinated and just ready to go because their owner's died or their owner can't afford to keep them, then why wouldn't you adopt instead of buying? Obviously do your research and look online at different rescue shelters and visit them. But yeah, hopefully this will, even just to start conversations up. How many people don't know about fostering? How many people don't know where the local rescue shelter is? How many people don't know that loneliness is a big deal for people, and there's a lot of people suffering it of all ages. I think the more we talk about it and the normalisation of these conversations, the more people and animals that can be helped eventually.
Definitely. So what are your next steps?
Just about to finish filming a documentary, which is the edit started in Prague, and that's about campaigning and fertility clinics for dogs, which is quite an alarming rise at the moment in this country. I think my project that I'd love to get out there, and I probably will at some point, is a children's book. And I wrote it 16 years ago because I'm a keen scuba diver. And I noticed that when you dive on a coral reef, you see symbiotic relationships. So animals working together to survive, and these animals don't often look alike. And that fascinated me because I felt this is a really good life lesson for kids about racism and prejudice and bullying. So I thought I'd write a book about it. So it's written. It's called Leon's Reef, and Leon is a little yellow boxfish, and by nature of little yellow boxfish, they're sort of very inquisitive and they sort of dart around and they're always solitary. So you could argue that they're maybe lonely. And he goes around his reef one day questioning the symbiotic relationships. And there's the cleaner wrasse in the shark's mouth. There's the anemone fish in the anemone, which could sting it, but it doesn't because fish is covered in mucus. There's a crab that snips off bits of seaweed to make it camouflage, and then the seaweed can go to different places in the ocean. And there's my favourite, which is the goby fish and the blind shrimp. And the blind shrimp keeps the hole open in the sand, and the goby fish sits in the hole waiting for predators, and they both dart in. So there's sort of 4 examples of animals that look so different, behave so different, but depend on each other for survival. Literally can't survive without the other. So I thought that's a really good model. It all rhymes, and then there's a little bit of, there's a twist. I won't spoil it, no spoilers.
Oh my god, I need to read this.
And I will show you because it's a picture book. So at the moment it's written, and I'm looking for, if anyone's watching or listening that knows a good literary agent for a children's book, get in touch. Because I really want to get it out there, because I think, again, it's another vehicle that kids can learn about acceptance and community and environment, and it's non-fiction. It's that everything's true in it. So, I hope that's another legacy I want to leave, which is for teeny tiny kids, maybe 3 to 6, to learn and to hopefully prevent bullying and prevent racism and prevent, just horrible things that happen that
and promote a sense of belonging.
Yeah, and inclusivity, and it's just a nice thing. Just want to keep putting out nice things that kids and adults can engage with, that can prevent bad things happening. It's so simple when you boil it down, but
not that simple.
But there are all sort of lots of different projects that all try and do a similar thing, just via different routes.
And how can people get involved with wildlife support and rescue centres and supporting the local wildlife in their community?
I think there's wildlife trusts in every county. And I think that would be my first port of call. We've got one, obviously, Sussex Wildlife Trust. But there is an overarching brand, which is the Wildlife Trust. So go to them. And, it doesn't take much when you're out walking to see or notice stuff happening, maybe volunteers digging ditches or building brick walls or repairing fences. I think that's a great way to start. And then, that leads to just interacting with people, having more conversations, just being aware of more stuff going on. Obviously, social media, websites, research online can lead you to all sorts of projects going on, not just here, but abroad. I mean, a lot of the stuff I've done for animal welfare has been from the Amazon to China to India to the Ukraine. But it just shows that you can help anywhere and you can help anything. You just need to care enough and get involved. So
we usually end this podcast on 2 questions. The first question is, when did you last feel lonely?
I think when you're campaigning, so I do a lot of work with my all-party parliamentary group, you've always got a sense of loneliness with campaigning. So I now use that to oversee a lot of campaigns and to sort of facilitate change and open doors for people and obviously animals. So I think there's always a loneliness element to that, because you're going to Westminster and you're having these meetings and sometimes you're lobbying individual MPs. There is an element of loneliness to that. It's a sort of a loneliness I felt a lot more when I was full on campaigning, and it's the loneliness where you can't not do what you're doing. You're so committed to it and it takes years and it takes all your resources and all your mental capacity. And you kind of watch everyone else getting on with their lives through like a thick perspex shield. They're together, they're pregnant, they're having a baby, they're getting married, they're having another, and you're all around, everyone's sort of making progress with their lives while you're desperately trying to make progress with your campaigning. And I think that always delivers a sense of, you've almost trapped yourself in your own world of campaigning. And I think that often feels lonely, not always in a bad way, you're just really aware of it. So yeah, but nothing beats seeing the results of campaigning. And that's why we do it, because it's improving, it's helping, it's making progress on animals and humans' lives.
My final question is, what advice would you give to someone to help them feel more connected?
I think there's never been a time where it's been easier to find, let's say, societies, groups, sports teams, hobbies that can encourage you to interact with other people. I mean, I support Brighton and Hove Albion. This is a really good example, actually. I've got a season ticket. Every time I go, obviously season ticket, you sit in the same place every game. I've been going to Brighton and Hove Albion for years. We know the people in front, we know the people next to us, we know the people behind. Don't know their names, not all of them. Don't know what they do. But when there's a goal, we all hug each other. And at the beginning and the end of the game, we say hello and we say goodbye. We hug, and that's it. And it's such a weird community because you don't know who these people are, but you're brought together by a love of football and Brighton Hove Albion. Common ground.
Shared passions.
Shared passions. Wildlife is a great one. A feeling of relevance and a feeling of purpose and belonging.
And meeting other people who have that shared interest with you, that automatically creates a connection.
Exactly, and I think, when I say it's never been easier, for some people it's never been harder with so much available. But I think you've just got to make that first step, and if it doesn't work out, and if it's not the group or society or team for you, then that's okay. There's enough for everyone. Or maybe set up your own one, that works for you and may attract others. And
I think there's something to be said for that regularity, like you said with Brighton and Hove Albion, routine, like whether it's going to the same exercise class every week or dance class or art class or watching the starlings every sunset. Like it's seeing the same people on a routine and you're building that into your life.
Absolutely, and next game, so what day is it today? Friday. Next game is on Monday. Yes, I'm looking forward to the game, but I'm also looking forward to being around all these people that I don't really know what they do, or some of their
but
names.
In that moment in time, you are all there as fans.
It's like a micro community in that tiny area in the stadium. And I think that analogy applies to all sorts of, as I say, clubs, societies, teams, common interest groups. So it's there for the taking. It's up to us to kind of make it happen, or maybe up to our families or friends to maybe persuade us to. But I think as long as you know that if it doesn't work out, it's okay. It's no shame. Then it's okay. I think it's often a fear of failure that prevents people from making that first move.
Yeah. I also like the idea of the regularity, and the doing the same thing with the same group of people. Relationships take time to build. You probably weren't hugging them the first time you went to one of those games, but now you've been doing that for X number of years.
Exactly.
That builds the relationship over time and understanding that it will take time.
But I think the more connections we make and the more prepared we are to make those connections and reach out and start those conversations, I think the world does sort of it doesn't become a small world, because I think we're far more connected than we think we are. And I think it's just by reaching out and uncovering and revealing those connections, we can only form tighter communities that then can only sort of look out for each other and, cliche, make the world a much better place for everybody. Humans and animals.
Thank you so much. That is a lovely place to end. So thank you so much for your time.
My
I've
pleasure,
loved
Fenella.
this conversation.
Yeah,
Thank you.
We could talk for hours about
I
this
know.
stuff. Maybe we'll do a part 2. But yeah, thanks for listening. Thanks, Fenella, for inviting me on your podcast.